So now that we are going to start the open forum, I want to remind you that this conference is shown live stream on the website of the Federation. So a lot of other people can see it. We made the information public. And you will also have two girls that will be there with micro if you want to ask questions at the end of the presentations. And we will start with the presentation of Andrew Harding, who will give us a progress report on the relations between FEI, IFHA, and OIE. And IFHA and FEI now are acting within the International Horse Sports Confederation, which was created 2 years ago, from which I am the chairman presently, and it's a rotating chairmanship, and the chairmanship will go to Ingmar de Vos at the end of the year. We have our meeting of General Assembly in Hong Kong in December, where I will turn over, after 2 years, the chairmanship to Ingmar de Vos. So, Andrew, you get the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen. It's obvious that the movement of horses has always been important to both racing and breeding, and that this importance grows in step with our aspirations to internationalise the industry. Moreover, these benefits have myriad aspects, including branding, media attention, links with simulcasting and commingling, and, increasingly, the international rankings of the top group races. However, there are currently a number of challenges that impede the free and safe international movement of competition horses. These largely stem from inconsistent approaches to the application of health regulations and quarantine, leading to excessive and irregular health requirements for the importation of horses. Examples of the lack of harmonisation of conditions include varying requirements relating to residency and country of origin. These range from 21 to 60 days. The definition of temporary movement varies from 30 to 90 days. Vaccination requirements vary from none to several different vaccines. And there are others that are pointed to here. Against this background, the Executive Council endorsed a strategy to enhance the long-established work of the International Movement of Horses Committee through a two-pronged approach of closer engagement with the FEI and closer engagement with the World Animal Health Body, the OIE. The first of these has been formalised through the creation of the International Horse Sports Confederation, and I described that vehicle in detail last year. The second now takes the form of a 3-year public-private partnership between the OIE and the International Horse Sports Confederation, which is funded equally by the IFHA and FEI and documented in a formal collaboration agreement. But allow me now to give you a practical example of the work that's underway in this important area of the international movement of horses. And I've chosen as the subject South Africa. South Africa has a time-honoured industry. Horse breeding there began shortly after the arrival of the Dutch explorer Jan van Riebeeck in 1652. Indeed, a thriving export market had already begun by the end of the 18th century, with 1 stallion and 3 mares sent to Sydney with the first fleet in 1788. South Africa thus lays claim to the origin of the Australasian thoroughbred. Come forward to today, and South Africa is a Part 1 country in the Blue Book, and its racing is broadcast widely around the world. The country also has a significant breeding sector. Despite the heavy restrictions imposed on the movement of horses, there are currently over 500 registered breeders, with 131 stallions active during the 2016 season. Roughly 3,000 foals are produced annually. While a number of the sires used are imported stallions, shuttling is impossible. The top 3 sires are South African bred. Currently, the movement of horses out of South Africa is both expensive and logistically difficult because of long quarantine periods and long third country residency periods. The South African industry has for many years attempted to simplify exportation protocols. In 1997, a system to safely export horses to the EU was approved. The system was based on the creation of a free zone within the Cape Province and a 40-day period of quarantine in vector-protected stables within this free zone. The Cape Province was chosen for the site of the free zone because the area is historically free of this disease and because substantial geographic barriers to the uncontrolled movement of horses surround the area. However, the exportation of horses from the free zone has been repeatedly suspended, and each time this occurs, it is a major setback. EU animal health legislation requires that all importations from any country must be suspended for 2 years from the time of the last reported case in that country. And prior to the resumption of horse movements, the local government veterinary authority must demonstrate freedom from the disease to the satisfaction of the EU. Currently, movements are only taking place via Mauritius and the EU, which requires 21 days quarantine in Cape Town, a 90-day residency period in Mauritius, and a 60-day residency period in the EU, a total of 171 days, prior to being eligible for exportation to most countries. African horse sickness itself has a number of features that should be noted. It's a viral disease. It's transmitted by an insect species, Culicoides. Zebras are carriers of the virus, but are not clinically affected by it. The South African zebra population is a reservoir for the virus that cannot be eliminated. But note this. First, the incubation period is only short, averaging 5 to 7 days. Second, this infectious disease is not transmitted by aerosol or direct contact between horses, as is the case with diseases such as equine influenza, which have a much higher impact on productivity. 3, outbreaks of African horse sickness in South Africa tend to occur only in the warmer months from February to May, when the weather conditions are favourable to the breeding of the Culicoides insects. 4, Culicoides are active at night and don't tend to enter buildings. So stabling horses for 2 hours prior to dusk and for 2 hours after sunrise has historically proven to be a very effective management tool. And finally, crucially, South Africa has never, ever exported an IFHA infected horse. So what have we done under the aegis of the IFHA? In August of 2016, an IFHA ARF expert mission comprising Dr. Roland de Volts and Dr. Kenneth Lamb from the Hong Kong Jockey Club visited South Africa to meet with industry and government representatives to assist in formulating an action plan to recommence direct horse exports. In December of 2016, a special session of the annual meeting of the International Movement of Horses Committee, held in Hong Kong, was devoted to the presentation of recent developments and initiatives by South African scientists and industry representatives, and also to brainstorm by committee members on means of assisting the South Africans in their efforts. And most recently, in July of this year, the IFHA and the FEI, working together under the Confederation and the OIE, staged a special workshop in Johannesburg with representatives of industry and government to further progress the roadmap for recommencing direct exports. Real progress is being made. There have been 3 major aspects to this. The first relates to vaccine. Currently, only a South African-produced live attenuated vaccine is available. The supply of vaccine is limited, single-dose vaccination does not provide strong immunity, and there is a real risk of a live vaccine strain reverting to virulence in susceptible horses. Vaccination with the currently available vaccines is not a viable risk management tool for importing countries. However, the development of safer vaccines that will not result in reversion to virulence could potentially be available within a few years. And through the Confederation, OIE research on market scale is facilitating this. The second point relates to testing. At present, there hasn't been an OIE-validated diagnostic test for African horse sickness that can differentiate between a vaccinated horse and an infected horse. This means official pre-export testing can't be performed. However, through our collaboration agreement with the OIE, a validation procedure for a PCR test is in progress, and it is anticipated will be completed within 12 months. Finally, perhaps most importantly, the South African horse industry is now committed to building an improved vector-protected quarantine facility in the Cape Province if a definite commitment to accept South African horses is made by a trading partner. The facts are that while the limitations of current vaccination diagnostic testing are significant, there are now real prospects of these being overcome through a holistic strategy that engages both industry and government and leverages the public-private partnership which the IFHA and FEI have achieved with the OIE. And the most salient point to convey to you is this. The nature of the disease itself, which I've described to you, means that it is relatively easy to manage the risks of importation of the disease compared to some other equine diseases, notably equine influenza. Safe movement of horses out of South Africa, both temporary trips to race abroad and permanent export of locally bred thoroughbreds, is absolutely achievable. Progress on an issue which for decades has been treated as intractable is not only possible, it is being achieved. Finally, I want to make it clear that South Africa is just an example of what we want to achieve. Over 2017-18, a number of OIE regional workshops are planned across the globe to identify impediments to movements and to facilitate solutions to these. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. Stay there, please, Andrew. Thank you very much. Could you comment on the situation between Hong Kong and Australia? There was some publication in the press about the problem of movement of horses between the two countries. So can you update us where it stands now?
Well, Mr. Chairman, noting that this is an open forum, I will be circumspect in my comments and limit myself to those facts that are in the public domain. The Australian Government's Department of Agriculture and Water Resources has temporarily suspended movements of horses from Hong Kong to Australia. It must be said that we don't think that this is an evidence-based, a science-based reaction. It does not give proper accord to the 20-year or more history of successful management of quarantine and biosecurity by the Hong Kong Jockey Club and by the IFCD. And it is an extraordinary step to take in circumstances in which there has been no breach of biosecurity arrangements pointed to. That said, there is very constructive dialogue now underway between the relevant authorities of Hong Kong and Australia, and we hope that this issue can be swiftly resolved through, as I say, a science-based and evidence-based approach to assessing the risks. Yes, and I'm reminded to give you the full background. What the Hong Kong Jockey Club is currently engaged on is an extraordinarily exciting project, which is to establish a training centre within China. Now, this training centre is being constructed in the world's first equine disease-free zone. This equine disease-free zone has a very significant history in relation to the movement of horses. It was developed as a concept of the OIE, the World Animal Health Organization, an expert mission, interestingly led by the former Chief Veterinary Officer of Australia, Dr. Gardner Murray, established this equine disease-free zone in the lead up to the Asian Games held in Guangzhou. Those games were held successfully. There were 95 horses from some 13 countries competing in those Asian Games. They came into Hong Kong and to the equine disease-free zone across the border, competed there, came back, went back to their countries of origin, all without incident. It was lauded as a great success, and it was a world first in terms of this new concept, this extension of compartmentalisation, the equine disease-free zone. And the EDFZ was specifically recognised by the European Union, and that recognition continues to this day. And the arrangements that support this equine disease-free zone, which include disease surveillance of the whole region, movement controls. Around the site of the Shungfa Training Centre, there is a 2,000 square kilometre area that is free of all horses. And within this, at its core, there is a 5 kilometre zone which is completely controlled by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, and only the Jockey Club's horses are permitted to enter into it. Now, at present, as we draw closer to the operational date of the Shungfa Training Centre, we have, as you might expect, have commenced to conduct trials of the movements of horses between Hong Kong, Sha Tin, to the training centre across the border. These have been a small number of horses on each occasion in horse floats that have been sealed by the relevant government authorities in both Hong Kong and in People's Republic of China. The movement has been tracked and supervised directly by these government authorities. The seal's been broken by the government authorities in China. The horses have then been brought straight back. This has been done on 7 occasions now in accordance with all of our own biosecurity protocols and standard operating procedures, and all of the requirements that are superimposed on those by both Hong Kong government and the government authorities in China. And it is relevant to note that when the first of these trials was conducted in February of 2016, the fact of this successful trial was communicated to all of Hong Kong's 17 trading partners. Specifically, the detail was set out officially to all of the 17 trading partners, including Australia, and every trading partner, including Australia, accepted this as a great success. So it is passing strange that 18 months later, what was a success and congratulated 18 months ago is now the occasion of such a prejudicial action as to suspend horse movements. But as I say, that's the history. The present is that through assistance that we've had, in particular from our brother authority in Australia, Racing Australia, there is a very constructive dialogue now in place, and we look forward to horse movements being reinstated.
Thank you. Any comment from Racing Australia? No? So I wish you good luck. If you need any support, I can ask our executive director to prepare a letter for me to be signed and sent at any time.
I'm sure he'll be happy to oblige.
Thank you, Andrew. So now we'll remain in Asia, and I will ask Mr. Sung-Ho Ryu to join us. He's a very active man in charge of international affairs, and he's been the key person in the development of the first international races in Seoul, which have been a great success. I was happy to be able to be there last year, and I'm waiting for the new turf course to help the European horses to compete against the Japanese and the local one. And he has a surname, maybe you don't know, but everybody is calling him Batman. So now it's up to Batman to let us fly, not to North Korea, but to South Korea for the international conference, for the Asian Racing Conference.
Thank you, Chairman Mr. Romane. Good morning, honored delegates. Today I am going to present to you about the 37th Asian Racing Conference, which will be held in Seoul between 13th and 18th May 2018. I have divided my introduction of the 37th ARC into 4 parts. Firstly, I will give an outline of the 37th ARC Seoul in 2018. Secondly, I will go through the conference program, social program, and tour program. Thirdly, I will touch on registration and accommodation information. And lastly, exhibition and sponsorship information. I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. The host of the ARC are the Asian Racing Federation and Korea Racing Authority. The Asian Racing Federation was established in 2016 with the aim of leading and building a culture of innovation in the Asian racing industry. The ARF is one of the 3 regional racing federations that makes up the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities and has 21 full members and 1 associate member and 3 affiliate members for a total of 25 member countries across the region. The objective of the ARF is to pursue mutual development through collaboration in the region, such as firstly promoting the internationalization of the racing through supporting international competition and commingling of betting pools. Secondly, controlling race quality and working on enhancing the core issue of sport integrity. And lastly, assisting in the development of racing throughout the ARF member countries. Actually, the ARF, led by Chairman Mr. Winfried Engelbrecht, has been a really strong supporter for Korean racing. And the KRA is sole racing authority in Korea with the aim of promoting fair racing and advancement of the livestock industry in Korea. And the authority also exerts every effort to support local communities. The KRA previously hosted the ARC in 1980 and 2005. So next year will be the 3rd conference visit to the Seoul. The 37th ARC will offer various programs for participants, including business and specialist sessions, as well as exhibition and networking programs, providing an overall platform to pursue open and interesting dialogue on the issues and challenges that we are facing today. Furthermore, there will be, of course, opportunities for tours and cultural events. And this is our logo. It represents our aspiration for the successful hosting of the 37th ARC, which is symbolized with the Korean traditional color spectrum and future-oriented cityscapes of Seoul. The conference theme is Innovate, Collaborate, and Transform. This theme has been derived from Korea and Korean racing's current shape. Innovation is one of the primary drivers of South Korea economic rise. The recent success of Korea Racing Authority is embedded in the collaborative work with the other racing jurisdictions, and future success of the Korean horse racing industry lies in its ability to transform and adapt in this fast-changing world. The conference will be held in the 2nd week of May, with the primary location being COEX, the best convention center in Korea, and other locations include the Seoul Race Course, while social venues include the waterfront of Han River for Chief Delegate Dinner, and Dongdaemun Design Plaza for Korean Nights, and the Grand Intercontinental Hotel for the farewell dinner. During the week of the conference, we'll prepare a variety of programs that we are sure will help you fall in love with the beautiful colors of Korea and dynamic energy of Seoul. Under the theme of Innovate, Collaborate, and Transform, the 37th ARC will embrace the soul of South Korea and embodies the value of the KRA and captures what is necessary for racing to be successful in the 21st century. The 7 business sessions are comprised of wagering and advanced data and its impact on customers, strategies for future of racing, and customer-led marketing strategies, women and racing, and the rise of esports and animal welfare. And 3 specialist sessions are comprised of vocational training and sustainability from farm to track and race course management. The Bureau meetings are even more diverse and include Assembly Plenary Meeting, Asian Racing Federation Executive Committee Meeting, IFHA Executive Committee Meeting, Asia Pattern Committee, Asian African Total Association Meeting, and Asian Stewardship Conference, International Stewards Conference, and International Forum for Aftercare of Race Horses. As for the event, the 37th Asian Racing Conference will be celebrated by Korean Derby and ARF commemorative race at the Seoul Race Course. The opening ceremony and welcome dinner will be held on Monday after the Bureau sessions and various committee meetings. If you do not have any official meetings on Monday, you may join the Seoul City Tour, where you can feel the bit of a Gangnam style. And there will be a Korea Culture Night on Wednesday, and the closing ceremony on Thursday, and the post-conference tour to Jeju on Friday. The ARC is not only an academic conference, but is also a festival for the people in our industry. So we will prepare a balanced schedule of a conference, events, and sightseeing. You can register at the official 37th ARC website now. We hope you register at the early bird discount rate within this year. There are 2 intercontinental hotels at the site. The Intercontinental Coex is the nearest hotel to the conference venue, as it is joined on, and the Grand Intercontinental Hotel is just 10 minutes walk away walk away both over and underground, while the Ibis Ambassador is also about 10 minutes walk away. And this is a map of a hotel's location and the conference venue along with the room rate. And this shows sponsorship opportunities. The exhibition floor will be located at the first floor of the COEX. Considering the participating numbers of the conference, which is expected to be more than 600 from around the world, it would be a good chance to promote and expose exhibitors' profile. We are preparing for the exhibitors to have better chances of meeting potential clients and partners through a matchmaking application service. And there are many reasons why you must consider to join the Asian Racing Conference in 2018. And I want to mention the top 3 of them: the identifying emerging issues, the updating yourself with the best practice of other racing jurisdictions, and developing new strategies. Secondly, the networking, connecting yourself to leading experts both in and outside of our industry, and refreshing, the getting energy with friends from around the world, and having fun with amazing live events of the type that you can only experience in Korea. And I will appreciate your interest and look forward to your support soon. And please do not worry about the Kim Jong-un and their atomic bomb, because the distance between North and South Korea is too close. So if they like to shoot atomic bomb, it should be upright position. When the atomic bomb coming down to the target, if wind blows, it can be a kind of self-destruction procedure. And for your reference, the Winter Olympics will be held February in 2018. And also the booking rate from all around the world for sightseeing of Korea is getting increased. The Incheon International Airport is kind of world's busiest airport. So please don't worry about the North Korea. So listening, I have experienced very painful experience. When we hosted Korea Cup and Sprint, at the last minute, some Irish and English owners, they declined to send their horses. It was really last minute. So the field decreased, and I felt very sad about that. So in this regard of the Asian Racing Conference, I hope that kind of happenings won't happen again. Thank you very much, and please lay back and enjoy the following 1 minute long promotional video footage. Thank you very much.
Mainstay in front and the rear jumps up number 1. Mainstay first.
Thank you very much.
Mainstay in front.
Korea is a very big player in the racing and breeding around the world, and I really encourage you to go there. I've been there, and it's fascinating. It's a really developing and growing country, and I wish you the best of luck, Winfried and Kairi, for this conference. We will be there, and we will have our executive council, as you mentioned, meeting in May next year in Seoul on the Monday. Thank you. So now I will ask Andrew to come and join me. We'll update you on the implementation of the reference lab strategy, and I will start the first presentation. Unfortunately, Yves Bonner has been unable. It was planned to have a panel between Andrew Harding, Yves Bonner, and myself. Unfortunately, he has some serious health problems, and he is unable to attend. So on behalf of all of you, I want to wish him the best, and we hope to have him back soon. So I will start by updating you on the strategy. So some of you saw already a part of this presentation in Washington, but I think it's very important that we come back to why we have started this program, which started about 3 years ago with a meeting in Hong Kong, organized by Winfried and with Yves Bonner, who was there, when we reviewed the situation of how to guarantee as much as possible the global integrity of racing, which is our aim. So I will start by reminding why it is important. You all know that it is one of the most important issues, clearly because our funding comes from betting, and that absolutely we must be perceived like being totally clean. And we also have a mission, which is to select the thoroughbred breed, which is a very important one. And it's clear that it's very important for the future development. And what we want is to have a full control. It's not only during the racing, it's the whole life of the thoroughbred, which must be concerned. And we need to have full traceability to know where the horses are, whether they are in training, whether they are at the farm. So we must progressively, I know it's difficult in some countries around the world, and it's also a costly exercise, but we must absolutely have full traceability and permanent access to every horse and total transparency. As you all know, our international agreement is defining model rules, and clearly the model rules for doping control is one of the most important, because we have about 6 pages, 8 pages for this Article 6, which detail the model rules for the best practice. We have absolutely to develop out of competition testing, and the plan was to improve the capacity of anti-doping laboratories to detect specific drugs, what we call major doping agent, MDA. So we created this new concept when we started this 3 years ago of defining IFHA reference laboratories. After the 3 years, after the work which has been done, the creation of the task force, and Andrew will later on give you more details, we have been able to have 5 labs who have been certified. One in Australia, RSL in Flemington. They're doing 50,000 tests a year. And I think we show certainly one of the good example of the influence of this policy is that recently there was a grant from the government of Victoria of 1.6 million Australian dollars to the lab for investment. They were matching the same amount with the industry. So it shows that we are on the right way, because it's also a way to help these labs to get some additional funds. For France, we have the LCH, which is a very important lab. We analyze samples for 35 countries, and as you were told, we've been helping Spain to implement their control. And it's just for an indication, the budget of the French lab is 11 million euros. So you see how much the industry is involved in this policy. We have the LGC in Newmarket, Hong Kong Jockey Club, who has a fantastic facility, and UC Davis, who was the last one to join us, who is in California, and it was the one who tested the Breeders' Cup, if I'm right, recently, last year, with a positive. What is the process is we know that there is about 60 labs who are specialized in the racing industry around the world, collecting about 520,000 samples around the world. Clearly the detecting capabilities and resources of this lab are very different. If you take the French lab, the Australian labs, Hong Kong, and you compare with countries who don't have big funds available, there is clearly a difference. We must do our best in order to harmonize, which is what we have done by starting with the ISL, the international screening limits, and the detection times. We must be aware that the sensibility of the laboratory equipment over the past years, in the last 10 years, has been increased by more than 1,000 times. You imagine how sensitive it can be, and if you don't really coordinate and harmonize, it's clearly that you can have different results in different parts of the world, and for us it's a basic goal. So clearly it doesn't. We are not in competition with AORC. The AORC proficiency testing is a very important process, which is circulated once a year to all the labs around the world. But this accreditation is a quality recognition that a process has been established and is followed and is strictly followed. It doesn't mean that the equipment cannot be different from another lab. And I think there is a misunderstanding from a lot of the laboratories or racing authorities about the difference between accreditation and reference lab, which need much more investment, much more facilities, because we are fighting to detect major doping agents and substances that eliminate rapidly, and I would say rapidly it can be 20 minutes. So you have to find other ways to detect them. And that's where the scientific work done, the research done are very important, and it concerns anabolic agents, peptides, growth hormones, metabolic modulators. So it's very important, and clearly we need a harmonized system at the highest level, which is very, very important. If we look at the global figures around the world, we have 20 countries in part 1, 1,972 graded racers, 459 grade 1 racers, which are between ARF, North America, South America, and Europe, as you can see on the chart. If you take these grade 1 racers, 253 from them are in countries which have already IFHA reference laboratories. It doesn't mean that their grade 1 races are tested in these laboratories, because you have different states in Australia, different states in America, and different policy in these countries. But that's our aim, and I think it's very important. We started with problems which we had, as I already mentioned in the past, with two important races and with the Longines World Best Resource Rankings, where when we published them last January, it's now the product of the federation, and so it's the image of the federation. And we had in our rankings two horses that were incorporated, Doink and Masochistic at 117 and 115. One won the Grand Premio Latinoamericano, the other was second in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And both were tested positive to stanozolol, which everybody knows you must not use, and were disqualified. One of them, as Brazil didn't have a rule to suspend the horse, ran a month later, won, and so was taken on that basis. And the other one was Masochistic, who also was tested positive for stanozolol, disqualified, and then published. So it's very clear that we cannot accept that as far as IFHA, and our Executive Council discussed the issue at our EXCO meeting in Washington, and it was decided that the Longines World Best Resource Rankings will no more include horses that have tested positive for prohibited substance and be disqualified under the rules of racing of the country concerned. So it has other implications also with the rating of the racers. Well, I will not become too technical, but I think we want to have our philosophy very clear and well recognized around the world. So to summarize our strategy and IFHA recommendation, it's based on the harmonization of the anti-doping rules based on Article 6, with the possibility to put in the rules the possibility of suspending the horses. And if it's steroids, we are recommending a minimum of 6 months suspension for the horse, because we cannot accept that a horse, after being treated and officially recognized as treated by the trainer, can run and win a month later. We need full traceability of horses. We must implement out of competition testing, and it is a priority for the future. We must develop IFHA reference laboratories. So I've been told by some countries that we said, no, there is 5, it's finished. No, it's not finished. It's an open, absolutely program. We know already that there is some labs in the world that can meet the criteria. I think right now, if you look at what's available, it's certainly between 5 and 10, the number of labs that can become reference laboratories. We will also discuss the issue and work closely with IFHA, which is now a big partner for us. And our recommendation is that the samples of all grade 1 racers of part 1, which will mean 459, from which more than half have reference lab in their country, should be tested by reference laboratories, and that as soon as possible, all graded racers in part 1 should also be tested by reference lab. So I know it creates some jurisdiction problems. We don't have one in South America, but we now have one in North America, which is important. And we must, if we would be a sports federation, it would be imposed to all of you. But we are not a sports federation. We do not organize the events, so the events are not depending of an international Olympic committee like it is for the sports, unfortunately, because if it was the case, we would already impose it. But it's clearly our strategy. We would discuss how we can accelerate the plan at the Executive Council. It's not easy. Because behind there is some expenses, but we have labs available now in every continent, so please use them. And if you have labs who can be candidates, and we will help them, advise them. Unfortunately, we cannot provide funds for it, because, as you've seen, the Federation doesn't have the resources to pay for the investment when we see the amount of investment that was made in Australia. And clearly, we also must have rules that are very strict about publication of our best resource rankings, which will be implemented with next year classification concerning the year 217. So now I will ask Andrew to give you the details of the process, how it works, and how it can work, because as I said, it's an open program. Andrew?
Thank you, Louis. This subject terrain is chemistry. I'm no chemist. The only science that I ever studied was the dismal science, economics, and it's not known for precision. They say that economists assume everything except responsibility. Indeed, I think it was Ronald Reagan used to say that if an economist designed the game Trivial Pursuit, there would be 100 questions and 3,000 answers. But the people I'm working with are experts in precision and quantification. So, Louis asked me to explain, well, he has explained the policy outcomes which the EXCO wishes to achieve through its reference laboratory strategy. I was given the task of leading a task force to design the system to deliver on that. We've done that in the form of what we've dubbed the White Manual, which was approved by the Executive Council when it met in Washington on the occasion of the fabulous Pan-American Conference. And this morning, I'm going to paint with a very, very broad brush the elements of this system. Let me start with the architecture, and it has two tiers. The top layer is the Reference Laboratory Appointment Committee, and its functions are to maintain the contents of the White Manual itself, to decide on the appointment, suspension and revocation of appointment as an IFHA reference laboratory, to appoint the assessors that will carry out on-site assessments, and to administer a proficiency testing scheme and a negative samples exchange program for the IFHA reference laboratories. Now, supporting the RLAC, which I chair, is the Reference Laboratory Technical Committee. And it has as its functions to train the assessors that will be appointed by the RLAC, to act as a source of advice to the assessors and to the RLAC on individual assessments, to act as a source of advice on revisions to the White Manual, because this may well be an iterative process. There may be changes that are necessary over time, and to carry out such other functions as either the RLAC or the Executive Council may consider useful over time. Now, before proceeding to describe the process for appointment, it's important to reinforce the observation which has been made by Louis that it's not intended that all racing analytical laboratories would become IFHA reference laboratories, and the fact that a racing analytical laboratory does not become appointed as an IFHA reference laboratory is in no way a reflection on the general competency of that organisation. The best way to give you a clear sense of what characteristics a reference laboratory should have is to go to the threshold criteria which are set out in Annexure A to the White Manual. These characteristics include, but are not limited to, the scale of operation. So we are looking here for a laboratory that does a minimum of, say, 5,000 horse racing regulatory samples per year. Resourcing is highly relevant. So the floor space, the equipment, the staffing and the funding of the candidate laboratory will be examined. Research activity has been identified as key to those laboratories that really can aspire to becoming reference laboratories. And we've detailed here that there should be at least 2 peer-reviewed publications on racing chemistry in the past 5 years, or at least 2 papers or presentations in the last 3 ICRAVs. And very importantly, capability. And the specific requirement here is that there be no false positive and no more than 2 false negatives in total in the AORC proficiency testing program. Coming then to the process. Step 1 is a written application on the prescribed form, and it's essential to note here that this application must have received the support of and be presented by a racing authority, regional association or a national association that's a member of the International Federation. Yeah, we know that there's no one set of arrangements in every racing jurisdiction. In some countries, the racing laboratory is part of the racing authority. In other countries, the laboratory is a commercial operation that's contracted to provide services. That's no bar. All are welcome in terms of becoming reference laboratories, but they must have the endorsement of a member of the International Federation before they can make an application. RALAC will then carry out an initial assessment of the application, and if we're satisfied on the basis of the documentation provided that the candidate may satisfy the threshold criteria for appointment, then proficiency testing will be arranged, and an assessment team comprising one or more assessors will be appointed to carry out an on-site inspection. A set of approximately 5 proficiency testing samples consisting of equine urine, plasma and hair will be prepared and dispatched to the candidate laboratory. Each proficiency testing sample will contain one unknown substance at or above the concentration which is set out in Annexure C to the White Manual. The candidate laboratory must within 3 weeks successfully identify and, if relevant, quantify the substances detected. The next step in the process will be for our assessors to carry out an on-site assessment, and they'll do this after the reported results of the PT samples have been agreed by us as being satisfactory. That is, all unknown substances identified and no false positives reported. An appeal against the results of the proficiency testing is available and would be dealt with by us according to the procedures set out in the AORC proficiency testing standard operating procedure. And another level of review is available to the Executive Council in those circumstances where there's a question mark over the proficiency testing. Within approximately a month after the site visit, the assessment team will submit a report to the RLAC, and in preparing this report, the assessors may have regard to the matters set out in Annexure D to the White Manual and to any other matters which, in their judgment, are relevant. The assessment team may make a recommendation on whether an appointment should be made, or if they don't feel that's warranted in the circumstances, they may identify deficiencies to be corrected or needed improvements in order to be considered for appointment. Because as Louis said, this is intended to be a measure to assist development as much as it is grading the laboratories that already have that capability. We want to help others that aspire to achieve this to make the necessary step up. A decision by the RLAC is to reject a candidate laboratory's application is subject to review by the EXCO on an application by the head of the candidate laboratory. If, as the outcome of all that, it's determined that the laboratory has failed its application, it cannot apply again for appointment within 12 months after the date of the notification. Finally, let's touch on the ongoing requirements for reference laboratories, because it's not a matter that concludes at the point of appointment. There needs to be ongoing scrutiny of the reference laboratories, and this will include successful participation in our proficiency testing scheme and a negative sample exchange program. In the normal course, we'll carry out an on-site reassessment every 3 to 4 years, and of course there's a need to, on an ongoing basis, comply with the criteria set out in Annexure A to the White Manual. So that describes the system, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Just for your information, all these details, all the documents which were mentioned by Andrew are available on the website of IFHA since they were approved by the Executive Council. The reference laboratory appointment committee is composed of Andrew Harding, who is the chairman, Matt Giuliano, Yves Bonner, Ed Houghton, one AORC nominee to be confirmed, and eventually one WADA nominee. It's still going to be discussed. The secretary, he will be somebody from the Asian Wrestling Federation, which will be confirmed later. And the technical committee is composed by Yves Bonner, with the chairman, Terry Wan, and then you have the 5 directors of the 5 reference labs that were in the task force: Terry Wan for Hong Kong, Ludovic Bailly for France, David Beatty for RASL, Clive Pierce for Newmarket, and Scott Stanley for California, UC Davis. So clearly the problem of health of Yves Bonner are bad news for all of us because he was a key person in the task force, chairing the task force. And so we will have to discuss at the Executive Council meeting tomorrow morning how we deal with the issue, because we clearly now will have some people asking for help, and we have to provide this assistance, and we must not stop the project. So we will come back with more information after the EXCO has discussed this issue. So here is where we stand. Anyway, you can talk to these people, all the people are mentioned, which some of you already know. And all of us, including Andrew, are available to help you to look into detail before making an application and finding the people that will do the work. So this concludes this part, and we will now go to the first open session with Jim Gagliano, who will take the floor to update us on the International Forum for the Aftercare of Horses with Ray Pollick, that can also join him, and we will leave you the place.
Thanks for that introduction, Louis. It's wonderful to be back in Paris. As a future American President Thomas Jefferson observed after serving as minister to France in 1780s, a walkabout Paris will provide lessons in history, beauty, and the point of life. And it does that, all that, and more. As always, it's a pleasure once again to be among so many of my distinguished international colleagues, all of whom share a deep commitment to the sport of thoroughbred racing. At the outset, I'd like to personally thank Louis and Messieurs Delot and Rothschild for the unparalleled hospitality that's a hallmark of the ARC. Yesterday was a fabulous event in every regard, and we're all looking forward to next year's race at the refurbished Paris Longchamp. As for this conference, it boasts a rich history. As I said last year, the fact that it's been held for 50 years speaks to its relevance and to its importance. Today's agenda covers a multitude of important topics, and in my opinion, none more important than the welfare of our horses. Anyone who makes his or her living in this sport has a responsibility for the health and welfare of the horse over its lifetime. And we must see to it that they receive proper care, not only when they're competing on the racetrack and earning purse money, but also after their racing or breeding careers have concluded. As Vice Chairman of the IFHA, I'm proud to again have the topic of aftercare on our agenda this year. We haven't run out of topics. It's here because it should be here. Aftercare initiatives are and should always be an essential part of our business planning, regardless of geography. If we hope to prosper as an entertainment option, we need others to know and appreciate that we're taking good care of our horses. And that includes fans, both current and prospective, government officials, sponsors or prospective sponsors, the media, television networks, animal advocates, and of course, the general public. The American Jockey Club has made its presence felt in the aftercare arena, and we will continue to do so. At this event last year, I outlined several of our initiatives, and these programs live on, and aftercare will likely be a staple of every conference that we host. Most recently, at the Roundtable Conference in Saratoga last August, Stacy Clark-Rogers provided an uplifting update on the progress of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. And last fall, we devoted a segment of our Thoroughbred Owner Conference to aftercare, and it'll be addressed at our next owner conference, which will be held at Del Mar during the Breeders' Cup week later this month. In the US, it was also a key component of the first EquestriCon Fan Festival held in Saratoga in August and at a Horsemen's Convention in Las Vegas in March. And of course, the International Forum for the Aftercare of Racehorses conference back in May, which was hosted by the Jockey Club and supported by Godolphin. It was held in conjunction with our Pan American Conference, which was mentioned earlier, and was open to all racing jurisdictions, aftercare organizations, and other interested parties. For those of you that are here today in Paris or watching the live video stream of this conference and are not familiar with IFHA, it's an independent forum that recognizes geographical and industry differences among racing countries and is designed to enhance thoroughbred aftercare worldwide. Working with the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities, IFHA raises awareness of the importance of welfare of thoroughbreds, improves education on lifetime care, and helps increase demand for former racehorses in other equestrian sports. The two-day IFHA conference in May featured presentations from a unique international gathering of aftercare participants from some of our sports and our other equestrian organizations' top representatives in thoroughbred care, and enabled attendees to share views on aftercare best practices with a truly global audience. Topics covered all aspects of thoroughbred aftercare, including post-racing options, connecting aftercare and horse players, harmonization of the rules of racing for owners, and standards for aftercare providers. In her presentation to the entire Pan American Conference, Di Arbonat, the chairman of IFHA and the chief executive of retraining of racehorses, discussed IFHA's vision for aftercare in the global thoroughbred industry and reminded attendees how important aftercare is to the entire industry. We'll see those remarks in a moment. The keynote address on the final day of IFHA was delivered to the entire Pan American Conference by Michael Blowen, a former film critic for the Boston Globe and founder and president of the thoroughbred retirement facility, Old Friends. Here's a short 4-minute highlight video that was produced after the IFHA conference.
We all have a shared responsibility for the welfare of racehorses, which extends beyond the track. We need to tell the public, the racing community, the equestrian world of what's going on with these horses. They're talented and highly intelligent, and they really can do another job.
The heart of the horse is what makes them champions, competitors, and friends. I ask you, is it morally right to put the burden of care on others for these old warriors? Aftercare is an ongoing development and surely will improve. We are the stewards of the horse. We must serve them well.
I do believe that we do have some of the best thoroughbreds sitting in our backyard, and we've got to figure out a way that they can get redirected, because they could be the ultimate in a slightly different discipline.
I consider retirement a legitimate career. I believe these horses are priceless, but unless we can figure out a way that they can generate income once their racing and breeding careers are over, then it's going to be a dead end.
Protecting animals and being good to animals should not be seen as a business sacrifice. It should be seen as an economic opportunity, because you align the business with the values of the customers and the broader ethos in a society. There's been too much inattentiveness within the community to these questions, and it's time to really seize these issues and make them core to the work of the horse racing industry.
His Highness Sheikh Mohammed has always had a passion for every kind of horse. This isn't just a passion for racing and breeding, it extends to their lifetime care. The future of our whole industry is in our own hands. We all understand that these horses are our future, and we have a real responsibility of duty of care to them as well.
If anyone who attended that conference, or for that matter anyone sitting here today or watching the live video stream of this conference, was not convinced that animal welfare is a vital component for the future of thoroughbred racing, some sobering and thought-provoking remarks from Dr. Elliot Forbes at the IFHA conference opened some eyes. He talked about the importance of proper care, traceability and transparency, and about living up to the expectations of government bodies, animal welfare activists, and the mainstream community in general. He also shed light on the temporary government shutdown of greyhound racing in Australia. Here's a few clips from the conclusion of his presentation. They have relevance for anyone here today.
In summing up, the actions of the New South Wales State Government in threatening to close down the greyhound racing industry demonstrates that managing animal welfare is a critical activity. It is important to understand the spectrum of animal welfare activism and how it fits into the wider community views. Society is dynamic, and key trends influence the acceptance of the use of animals and present risks in the terms of the influence that extremists can exert upon the mainstream. We must ensure that our practices align with community expectations and that we communicate effectively to the mainstream about our animal welfare initiatives. This is important so as to mitigate the risk of activists pulling the mainstream towards their extreme end of the spectrum. Racing Australia has harmonised the rules to ensure there is full traceability for each stage of a horse's life in the racing industry, from birth until compulsory retirement. In Australia, our regulatory framework has been a strength which enables us to gather data and to drive culture change across the industry. We believe our new rules requiring the registration of foals, their beneficial owners and their location provides a powerful integrity and transparency tool to assist in the traceability of thoroughbred racehorses throughout their life. Racehorse retirement is a key issue and has been repeatedly targeted by the activists. Our notification of retirement form captures information as to the reasons and destination at the first exit of racing. The rule has been in place for nearly 3 years and provides a deep understanding of the reasons and destinations for horses at their first exit from racing. The underlying data is robust. 90% go to equestrian or breeding at the first exit from racing. Every state also invests in off-the-track programs to raise awareness and improve the equestrian uptake of retired thoroughbreds. However, continued and enhanced investment in off-the-track programs as well as whole-of-life tracking continue to be important. Society is dynamic and the measures and the strategies we need to implement must constantly evolve. The stakes have never been higher. The responsibilities on the people in this room have never been more important. Fortunately, our network of learning and cooperation provides us with the tools we need to succeed. Thank you for your attention.
I think it'd be wise to keep Dr. Forbes's words in mind as we go back to our respective racing communities. And while those presentations were very powerful, their relevance and importance linger. I would strongly recommend not only visiting the IFHA website, but also taking the time to watch replays of these presentations. It'll be well worth your time, I assure you. The international interest and participation in IFHA before, during, and after the conference has been overwhelming in the best sense of the term. In addition to the website and that video, IFHA has produced a document outlining the mission and vision of the organization. It includes some milestones reached in the first year, as well as short-term and long-term objectives. Those of you in attendance should have a copy at your seat. I'd like to briefly share some of the long-term goals. First, to ensure that the global racing industry is united and informed on aftercare issues. Second, put comprehensive programs in place to advocate and educate on lifetime care. Third, strive to ensure that all horse racing jurisdictions have aftercare programs in place and that they share best practices. And finally, develop partnerships on new aftercare initiatives. Looking back on the success and popularity of the IFHA conference in May, it's comforting to know that aftercare has become such a priority to so many individuals and organizations throughout the world. We hear and use the term harmonization at many of these international gatherings. The dictionary defines harmonize in this manner: to be in agreement, in action, sense, or feeling. Clearly, the launch and growth of the IFHA movement epitomizes harmonization. We're indeed in agreement in action, sense, and feeling. We need to care for racehorses throughout their lifetime. We should commend all the organizations that have devoted time, effort, and resources to this issue. And we're looking forward to the second International Forum for the Aftercare of Racehorses in Seoul, Korea, in conjunction with the Asian Racing Conference next May. We thank the Asian Racing Federation and the Korean Racing Authority for this opportunity, and we hope that every organization here today, as well as many others, will be able to participate and attend. Additional details about the conference will soon be available. Another initiative I'd like to briefly mention is something that the Jockey Club is supporting. It's called the Man of War Project, which was spearheaded by horse owner and philanthropist Earl Mack. Although anecdotal evidence suggests that equine-assisted therapy benefits those with post-traumatic stress disorder, no clinical evidence exists to show this. The Man of War Project is the first university-led research trial to determine the effectiveness of equine-assisted therapy and to establish guidelines for the application of equine-assisted therapy for veterans with PTSD. Equine-assisted therapy programs not only benefit the humans, but also benefit the horses, including the numerous retired thoroughbreds used in these programs. These programs are ideal second careers for our retired equine athletes, and we look forward to the results of this very, very important research. So our next speaker is Ray Pollock, the co-founder and publisher of the Pollock Report. The Pollock Report is an immensely popular trade publication that averages more than 200,000 unique visitors and 1 million page views each month. And its writers and digital journalists have been recognized with 2 Eclipse Awards, which is America's highest honor for journalists, a Sovereign Award, which is Canada's highest honor for journalists, and a Stanley Bergstein Award for excellence in investigative reporting. The Pollock Report specializes in independent, provocative, and investigative journalism and is a must-read for anyone interested in the thoroughbred industry, back home in the United States or even internationally. The news website features aggregated material and original content from its current staff of 5 full-time writers and editors and a number of freelance contributors. Ray and his talented staff have been reporting regularly on aftercare issues since the online publication was formed back in 2008. In fact, one of the regular features is the Aftercare Spotlight. Ray's here today to share journalist insights and perspectives of how aftercare and the growing awareness of it has become so important. Ray, welcome to the General Assembly. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jim, for that introduction, and thank you, Louis. As Jim said, it's always nice to be back here in Paris. I've covered the thoroughbred industry in different capacities for nearly 40 years and have attended conferences like this one on various continents, from Santiago, Chile, to Saratoga Springs, New York, Cape Town, South Africa, Tokyo, Japan, and here in Paris. The topics over the years and decades and in different corners of the world are often the same: racing, integrity, technology, marketing, harmonization of rules, competition from other forms of gambling. It wasn't until very recently that the concept of thoroughbred aftercare came into sharp focus, at least at this level of the industry. Let me start with my personal evolution on the issue of thoroughbred aftercare. I grew up in a rural environment in America's Midwest on a small farm that had sheep, horses, and other animals, but my entry into racing came on the gambling side. In the early 1980s, when I was working in Los Angeles at the Daily Racing Form, that's the newspaper that provides handicapping information to the punter, I didn't put any thought into where the horses would go when their racing days were over. I would occasionally hear derisive comments from other horse players about slow or injured racehorses winding up either as dog food or at the glue factory. And that may have been true for the first half of the 20th century. Horse hooves were melted down to be used as adhesive, and pet food often consisted of horse meat. That is no longer the case. What I did not know was that many ex-racehorses routinely were sent to slaughterhouses to be rendered for human consumption outside of the United States. For most of our history, horse meat has just not been on the American food menu. Many other horses wound up being neglected after their racing days were over, or in some cases abused. I learned much more about this when I moved from California to Kentucky in 1988 to begin working for a weekly magazine whose focus was not on gambling, but on the breeding and racing of thoroughbreds. Steve Haskin, a well-known turf writer who was a frequent contributor to this magazine, approached me with a story he wanted to write. It was about a relatively new program in New York that was based at a state prison and used thoroughbred racehorses to help rehabilitate the inmates. Many of the prisoners were hardened criminals who would learn about themselves through their interaction with the horses. The program was run by the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, an organization created in 1983 by Monique Keller, an advertising executive whose only involvement in racing was as a casual fan. The TRF was the first, and for many years, the only organization in America devoted to the care of retired racehorses. Its founding board of trustees included the late Penny Chenery, the owner and breeder of Triple Crown Hero Secretariat. Penny saw things that needed to be done for the horses well before most of us did. This seemed to me like a perfect story, a second chance for horses who might otherwise wind up at the slaughterhouse, and a second chance for people to get back into society with a different outlook on life and a possible vocation away from their criminal past. I went to my boss, the editor-in-chief, told him about the story, and was shocked by his response. "We can't publish that story," he said. "We don't want people to know what happens to racehorses when they leave the track." The plight of many ex-racehorses, whether neglected, abused, or taken to slaughter, is what I like to call one of our sport's dirty little secrets. For the most part, the mainstream media, daily newspapers and television, and the trade press, the daily, weekly, and monthly thoroughbred publications, paid no attention to this issue for decades. But there were several game-changing events that would soon take place, forcing the media to finally shine some light on the subject. In 1997, Daily Racing Form wrote a shocking story about the death of Exceller, a horse who won the Grand Prix de Paris here in France, the Coronation Cup in England, and the United States. He defeated 2 Triple Crown winners, Seattle Slew and Affirmed. Exceller was not successful at stud, and years later wound up in a slaughterhouse here in Europe. 3 months after the article detailing his demise, the Exceller Fund, an organization devoted to assisting ex-racehorses, was created by people who were outraged that the life of such a noble creature could end like that. They'll soon be celebrating their 20th anniversary, the Exceller Fund. In 2003, the Blood Horse magazine, where I was editor-in-chief at the time, published a story detailing the sad ending of 1986 Kentucky Derby winner Ferdinand, who was a failure at stud in the United States and overseas. His American owners wanted to bring him back to America from Japan and found out that he too had apparently been slaughtered for human consumption. To their credit, since that incident, the Japanese and American racing and breeding industries have been proactive in repatriating horses once they are finished breeding overseas. Kentucky Derby winners Silver Charm, Charismatic, and War Emblem are 3 examples of horses who returned home to Kentucky. In 2008, the filly 8 Bells broke both front legs just past the finish after running second in the Kentucky Derby. It's our biggest race of the year and watched by millions of people on television. While this is not an aftercare issue, this tragedy, followed quickly by a federal government hearing in the United States Congress examining drugs and other issues, put the welfare of horses under the spotlight of the national media. In 2011, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, the organization that started with a few ex-racehorses at this New York prison, was the subject of an investigative article in the New York Times focusing on the health and welfare of hundreds of retired racehorses under their care at several different locations. I was a member of the TRF Board of Directors at the time, and I can tell you this was a very difficult challenge for the organization. It had taken on too many horses, had limited financial resources, and was having a hard time feeding and caring for them properly. The take-home message from the New York Times was this: a multi-billion-dollar industry was discarding its athletes callously and not lending financial assistance to well-intentioned, underfunded organizations trying to clean up the mess that thoroughbred owners and breeders had created. This is not what we would call good optics. In the meantime, animal welfare organizations like PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, viewed horse racing as an easy target. They saw what happened to greyhound racing in the state of Massachusetts. By a 56 to 44% margin, citizens voting in a 2008 referendum swiftly put an end to a 75-year-old sport. PETA and others are against what they call the exploitation of animals for entertainment. They have been successful in shutting down the captive whale program at the SeaWorld theme parks throughout the United States and forced Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus to stop using elephants in their shows. This put the company out of business after 146 years of entertaining millions of families. So this is a serious challenge to the horse industry in the United States, where people's attitude about animals is evolving. It is essential that we do all we can to present thoroughbred racing in the best possible light and to protect our equine athletes both during and after their racing careers. Shortly after the New York Times report on the TRF, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, horse owner Jack Wolf put forth a proposal for a national organization to provide oversight and financial support to the growing number of organizations devoted to caring for and repurposing ex-racehorses. Institutional funding came from thoroughbred industry organizations like the Jockey Club, Breeders' Cup, and Keeneland, as well as annual donations from owners, breeders, stallion farms, racetracks, sale companies, and others. The oversight is an important component of the TAA. It accredits these organizations to ensure they are providing proper care for the animals, and importantly, have a euthanasia policy that is consistent with the one developed by the American Association of Equine Practitioners. Another positive step occurred in 2008 when Suffolk Downs, a track in Boston, Massachusetts, adopted what has come to be known as a no-slaughter policy. The policy protects horses stabled there from being sold for the purposes of slaughter. Similar policies have now been adopted at most American tracks, though it can be a difficult rule to enforce. So all of this is good news, but we can't proclaim mission accomplished. The supply of thoroughbreds leaving the track is greater than the demand from the more than 60 aftercare organizations across the United States and Canada now accredited by the TAA. Some of these organizations offer just a sanctuary for ex-racehorses, while others rehabilitate, retrain, and adopt out thoroughbreds who go on to successful second careers in a variety of disciplines. Not only are there more organizations involved in aftercare and more support from industry stakeholders, there is a growing number of horse shows and events for thoroughbreds across the country. Last month in Lexington, Kentucky, horses from 22 of 50 American states competed in the third annual All-Thoroughbred Charity Horse Show, held in conjunction with the Jockey Club's Thoroughbred Incentive Program, or TIP. This event was an enormous success. One of the winners that day was a 9-year-old mare named Satin's Angel. She's registered with the Jockey Club as Queen Satin and won 3 races from 18 starts. After the event was over, I received an email from her owner, and it reads in part, "Satin's Angel was rescued from Sugar Creek Auction, a terrible place. It's where buyers go to purchase horses to send to slaughter in either United States or Canada, Mexico or Canada, rather. She was beaten there to the point you couldn't touch her face without her flinching or throwing her head. My trainer respected her, and I bought her from my trainer and worked with her. Just thought it would be an interesting article, as many people don't believe in second chances." 5.5 years ago, I was approached by Jen Reutz, a thoroughbred industry marketing specialist who had an idea for a weekly column for the Pollock Report. She wanted to write about former racehorses, otherwise known as off-track thoroughbreds, or OTTBs. These horses who would move from the racetrack for second careers as hunters and jumpers, show horses, stable ponies, and even therapeutic animals for special needs individuals or traumatized military veterans returning from war. And as much as I loved the idea, I was worried that she would run out of success stories of horses like Satin's Queen who were given second chances. Nearly 300 articles later, the aftercare spotlight is going strong and is one of our website's most popular features. It makes people feel good about the thoroughbred racehorse. Success stories like this are the kind that will help win the war over public opinion waged by those who want thoroughbred racing to end. In today's world, where the internet and social media have more control over the message than traditional media, it is vitally important to get these success stories out there to be shared on Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms. We know that every retired racehorse cannot transition to a second career, but it's important to recognize and celebrate those who do. It's also critical for the horse industry through infrastructure and financial backing to support the people who are making this happen. Thank you very much.
Ray, thank you for those candid remarks. Why don't you come over here and join me? I have a question for you. You mentioned that the amount of articles that your publication has written on aftercare. What is the response from your readers relative to the response on other types of stories?
One of the things I hear all the time is, why don't you write something good instead of all the negative news? And I always say, well, nobody writes about the bank that isn't robbed, you know, or the airplane that didn't crash. So the news business is generally negative. But this is one of those, you know, feel-good stories that people really respond to. And stories about animal welfare, bad or good, are some of the most popular stories on our site. You know, there are a lot of bad news stories about animal welfare. Horses found at slaughter, they're at the auctions. But the thoroughbred aftercare stories that we've done have proven to be very popular.
In the United States, we've the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance and many of the other aftercare providers really are relying on voluntary donations, and funding. A mechanism for funding is something we've debated probably since your time on the TRF board and my time involved with the TAA. In your opinion, maybe a loaded question to be asking, what's the best funding method for racing jurisdictions to consider for these types of programs?
To me, California has in the United States has the best funding, and that's something called CARMA, which stands for California Retirement Account, I think it is, management. And yeah, they have an opt-out system for horse owners, not opt-in, but opt-out, that 0.3% of the purse money is assigned to CARMA, which then sends the money to different retirement organizations within the state of California. So the pressure is on thoroughbred owners to say, no, I don't want to give money, versus, yes, I will give money. And it's money that's coming out of purses that it's not in their pockets yet. I've also heard a proposal that I think is really a good one that's even better. How you get it done, I don't know. And that would be basically have a toll gate at the racetrack. When a horse first comes to the racetrack or is first entered to make its first race, that owner puts money, and the number I heard was $1,000, which is roughly, you know, which is less than 1 month's training bills in most places, into an escrow account, so that every horse that goes to race, the owner of that horse at that time puts money into a fund that basically is devoted to aftercare, not necessarily for that one racehorse, but for all racehorses when they end.
Well, thank you. So we've given you some perspective here from North America, and many of you in the audience have experiences that I think should be shared. So as such, I'd like to ask a couple of you to provide some comments. This one's for Lyndon Behrens. I see here, Chief Executive Officer of the National Horse Racing Authority of South Africa, and I understand a former Chief Executive Officer of the Olympic Committee of South Africa from 2001 to 2004. Could you make sure Lyndon has a microphone? Lyndon, I understand that South Africa, as a result of having a representative at the IFHA conference, is exploring some new programs. Could you share some of those details, Lyndon?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, part of our Vision 2020 program had the aftercare of horses as one of our strategic objectives. But then I think two events spurred us into further action. And one was really the interest and the passion of the media in South Africa and some individuals in that, and also the passion of some of our owners in terms of aftercare. And then the second one was when I attended the IFHA conference in DC. And really it became abundantly clear to me that unless the NHA, in our case, or the Racing Authority, commits to it and leads the process, we're not going to have a sustainable program. So what we are saying is, let's move it from the few people, those with the goodwill, and the many more with good conscience, and the many donations, to all being part of the process. And in order to do that, normally the racing authority either registers or licenses or levies nearly everyone in the industry. So there is a number of touch points to start off. So the philosophical view that I'm going to promote and have the blessing of the chairman is that we as the regulatory authority, we take the first step, because already all the participants make a contribution in terms of fees and levies. If we manage our budget a bit better and we create the first step towards that fund, it will go a long way. Then we can add all the donations. So that's really on the philosophical way. Just like mining companies, when they have mines, they must have a rehabilitation fund in their budget line item. Just like oil companies must rehabilitate oil fields, it must be part of their budget. So also, it is the cost of doing business. I don't think it's negotiable. It's not a nice to have. It must not be dependent on goodwill. It must be part and parcel of the program and then goodwill. So what we like, in conclusion, what we like to do as the racing authority is act like an umbrella for the industry and bring all the good programs that's currently happening in South Africa, bring it under one umbrella with one golden thread, with certain standards and accreditation, and linking it to many of the best practice programs, some that I've seen here today. We try and link our programs to that and let us coordinate it, align it, and make sure that we really focus on the aftercare.
No, that's terrific. Well said, and congratulations for taking that initiative. I see your chairman's here, and we appreciate his support for you and for your team. I'm going to turn to Andrew Harding. I know that the Hong Kong Jockey Club has some programs in place and perhaps a formula for funding. Andrew, Andrew's right here. I don't know if, right there. Thank you. Andrew, could you comment?
Oh, okay, Jim. Look, the club's commitment in this area long precedes my time with the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And I've got to say, though, it's one of the most rewarding and gratifying aspects of my involvement with the club, being some part of what's done currently. And there are several threads to it. One is an import levy that is collected from all horse owners whenever a horse is brought into the country. And then that's able to be used to assist them in making their own arrangements for the post-racing care of their horses. Another important thread is the dedicated team that we have at our equestrian centre at Bees River that apply themselves to the retraining of horses so that they can have a post-racing career, and that can take place at one of our 3 public riding schools that the club maintains, or as a horse that's kept on livery and ridden by one of the club's members at the Bees River Equestrian Centre itself. We also have some partnerships in place with overseas farms for those horses that might require a longer period of rehabilitation, for those horses to have that longer period of rehabilitation and then the retraining that will enable them to go on to a useful post-racing career in some other equestrian pursuit. We make donations. We are very careful about that in terms of selecting the organisations to whom we donate horses, but donees can include riding schools, other than those that we operate, equestrian teams, universities, mounted police. And then in relation to that, it's important that I point out that we consider that we have an ongoing obligation there to monitor the welfare of the horses that we do donate. And so we have a very robust program in place for the ongoing monitoring of the welfare of those horses to see that they're receiving the care that's warranted, and some legal arrangements in place that give us the authority then to step in if we did ever become concerned about the way those horses are being treated. So as I said, there are a number of threads, as I said, it's really gratifying to be some small part of that.
Well, thank you both for sharing those comments. Sharing best practices or challenging ourselves is really the hallmark of this conference. Any other comments from the floor for myself or Ray, or something you just want to share about your individual perspective? All right, well, thank you. Just before we conclude, I'd just like to offer a couple of comments. It would be inadequate to talk about horse welfare without mentioning the situation that's occurring in particular in Puerto Rico. But as many of you know, the U.S. has been hit particularly hard this hurricane season with Category 4 storms making landfall in Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and Puerto Rico. And our industry quickly responded to provide relief efforts for the horses stranded by these very powerful storms. Of greatest concern is Hurricane Maria, which struck Puerto Rico almost 2 weeks ago. Reports that we've received describe devastating consequences on, frankly, an unimaginable scale. One particularly disturbing report was that more than 800 thoroughbreds were stranded in debris-ridden stalls at Camarero Racetrack. The industry was quick to respond, and thanks to reporting by Blood Horse, Pollock Report, Thoroughbred Daily News, others, awareness was quickly raised. Funds were put together and resources were brought to bear. Flights have been organized to deliver human and equine relief into the affected areas. Unfortunately, as many of you have read, securing landing permits into the airport at San Juan Airport has been very difficult. We're hopeful that now, almost 2 weeks out, we'll have the necessary credentials granted today or tomorrow to dispatch 2 cargo planes loaded with feed and supplies to Puerto Rico. And again, we're hopeful, and we ask you to keep the Puerto Rican horses and their horsemen in your thoughts and prayers during this tragedy for them. Thank you for this opportunity, and hope you enjoy the rest of today's conference.